Welcome to Liberty Law Talk, part of Liberty Fund's online library of law and liberty. Your host is Liberty Fund Fellow Richard Reinsch. Our website is libertylawtalk.org, where you can subscribe, comment, find other episodes and links relevant to today's conversation. Our email address is mail@libertylawtalk.org. We'd love to hear from you. Today we are talking with Christopher Lazarski about his latest book, Power Tends to Corrupt, Lord Acton's Study of Liberty. Christopher Lazarski is Associate Dean in the School of International Relations at Lazarski University, Warsaw, and he is the author of The Lost Opportunity, Attempts at Unification of the Anti-Bolsheviks. Christopher, I'm so glad to have you on this program to discuss one of my favorite thinkers and a thinker who is also central to Liberty Fund, Lord Acton.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
Okay, Christopher, let me ask you here at the beginning. So the subtitle of your book, Lord Acton's Study of Liberty. How does the study of liberty, or why is the study of liberty so prominent for Lord Acton, writing when he did in the last half of the 19th century?
Well, he was a historian of liberty. I assume you know that. He centered his research and his writing about liberty. He devoted, he was a passionate lover of liberty. He didn't write history of liberty, of which he planned to write for all his life. That's very unfortunate, and I was trying to recreate his history of liberty, which he failed to write, on the basis, of course, of his numerous writings, numerous essays, articles. Acton was one of the best educated person in England, probably in Europe or in Western world in 19th century. He was a great scholar and as I said before, lover of liberty.
Let me ask you, what? I'm gonna just a general question here at the beginning. So, you note in the book he wanted to write a final, all-encompassing study of liberty, which he failed to write. He, as you say, he read one book a day and took meticulous notes of every book he read. And he was planning for this project, and he gives up. He stops what he's doing. He doesn't think he can complete it. The task is too much for him. So maybe an interesting question to think about. What does he think the nature of the liberty is generally, but also more specifically, political liberty? How do we find it? How do we know it? And why is it so important?
Well, he failed to write the history of liberty because he imposed on himself impossible criteria.
Okay.
He wanted to write not only about liberty itself, but also he wanted to implement the recent research. And even for a person who read a book a day, not only read but also made many notes, still it was impossible. My attempt was just to analyze what he read, and then on the basis of that I tried to draw a logical conclusion and to recreate not only his history of liberty but also his theory of liberty, which he never wrote.
What do you think that theory of liberty is?
Well, I'm reluctant to answer immediately because probably Acton would hate that. He had a Greek attitude toward politics or freedom, namely that he researched history. He didn't create theory as an abstract idea, but he based it on his research. He observed existing political societies since antiquity, from antiquity until today, until his time, and on the basis of that, he didn't write theory, but he provided many observations which recreation of theory of liberty and history of liberty was possible. I attempted that.
This kind of brings us into a question I wanted to ask you, and that is this concept of mature liberty and Lord Acton's thought. And a part of the mature liberty is the rejection, and I think you were alluding to this, of liberty has an abstract proposition. You note in your book his opposition to much of the French Revolution and that it wants to geometrically produce liberty from a document, from a legislative assembly, apart from how liberty would have grown in France, even with all of the problems that helped bring about the French Revolution with its political and social institutions, but that Lord Acton emphasizes liberty is historical, it's a growth, and it's a maturation process. Help us understand that concept as Acton understands it.
Well, Acton did not believe in abstract ideas and in introducing liberty through a revolution. He was a student of Burke, Tocqueville, and he, in spite of differences between them and him, still he was a faithful student of them. Therefore, what he did, he proposed, or he researched, he pondered the question, what makes a person, individual, and the community in which that individual lives free, politically, of course. What are the conditions which makes an individual free? Now, he claimed that freedom begins in a community and citizenship, and that we have to introduce how his concept, how he understands citizenship. Citizen is someone who is not enjoying equal rights, but someone who participates in his or her future. Citizen is someone who participates all the time, makes a decision, and through self-government, which exists on the basic level in the community, in the city, town, allows that citizen to participate.
So you would say, Lord Acton would say, a necessary part of political liberty may not be across-the-board equality, but you have to participate in the habits of self-government.
Exactly.
Very Tocquevillian reflection there, yes.
Exactly. He, as you mentioned earlier in your question, he distanced himself from the concept of the French Revolution or enlightened thinkers who thought that by revoking abstract ideas that men are born free in a state of nature, therefore they are free and equal. He, on the contrary, he claimed that liberty starts at the bottom level in the community. That is why he was so enthusiastic about America, colonial times, and then the United States, as well as his own fatherland, England, in which he saw that kind of liberty which starts at the bottom and goes up, not a liberty which starts from abstract principles and then is introduced to a community as French Revolution tried to do it.
Part of the concept of mature liberty, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Christopher, is revealed in these two essays. They're the essays that introduced me to Lord Acton. I think of a lot of other people. His essay, The History of Freedom and Antiquity, and The History of Freedom and Christianity. What is the significance of these essays in Acton's thought, in your estimation?
Well, they were very important because at the moment when he was prepared and still entertaining the thought of writing History of Liberty, he wrote those two essays in a span of 2 years, and this is the abbreviation of something which he was going to write. This is very unfortunate that he didn't complete his project, but those two essays were very important for me because when I collected various thoughts and his essays and tried to make reasonable conclusions, draw reasonable conclusions from it, I could not do it without those two essays. They were extremely important. This is the essence of Acton's thought. As for mature liberty, well, he thinks that liberty, as I said earlier, starts from the community and citizenship, and we can trace the origin of that in antiquity. It's not that citizenship and a mature freedom occurred only in the 18th century after the Glorious Revolution and the French Revolution, but he thought that we can discover this desire for liberty much earlier. He saw the origin in Western civilization, the origin of liberty in ancient Hebrew or ancient Israel, which he treated as the beginning of political liberty in Western civilization. He pointed out at the fact that when the Jews moved from Israel and moved to the Promised Land, they established a series of local communities, tribes and clans who had their own leaders, natural or organic leaders, and who did not have central authority that could attempt to impose on them certain laws and requirements. So for about 2 centuries, the Jews lived in confederation, as he called it, confederation of about 150 tribes and clans who had their own local leaders. Of course, not democratic, but the judges which ruled in those communities start from the bottom. They were not imposed from above. So they were natural, organic leaders. And though they were very far from mature liberty, I hope we will return later on to further define mature liberty as Acton understood it. But still, that's the beginning. And he claimed that Hebrew notion of liberty set the principles which are timeless, namely higher law, national tradition, and organic growth of political tradition.
Interesting. You should end there with that, because as I'm thinking of these two essays, I'm also thinking of the influence of religion in Lord Acton's mind regarding the development of liberty, and you've mentioned the Hebrew contribution, but also separating these two essays, I think, is Christianity. And
Well, religion.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Well, religion played a very important factor in Acton's thought, because he thought that religion was the first factor which led to the division of powers or limitation of power, political power. Hebrew monarchs had limited power because they did not have legislative power. The law was divinely ordained. Law was given. Law, as it is inscribed in Jewish Torah. Therefore, that law limited royal power, and that was the beginning. This is what he meant by higher law, that there is higher law which limits monarchs' power, and then national tradition in case of Jews who got accustomed to having local leaders, and therefore resisted central power.
Thinking about religion here, also something important in the growth of liberty, and I think this is significant, is conscience, the role of conscience in relation to understanding one's duties, which then authorizes your rights to perform those duties. I think I understand Lord Acton to be saying that.
Mm-hmm.
Significant. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Well, Acton, if we are to define liberty as Acton understood it in the briefest form, is that liberty is freedom of doing what one ought to do, and then he searched for the conditions which allowed one to fulfill that obligation, that duty. That is why he saw that in Hebrew polity this sort of freedom existed. Conscience is very closely related to religion. Actually, conscience starts from religion, at least as Acton saw it. Therefore, our ability to do what one ought to do is impossible without limitation on political power.
Okay.
That's how it started in Hebrew polity.
I wanted to, I was going to say, set off, because I think not only is Lord Acton's account of religion in relation to the development of liberty something that is, I think, striking to the modern ear, or to late modern ears, but also if we could juxtapose Lord Acton's account of liberty here with one of his contemporaries, John Stuart Mill, I think that's instructive as well. Do you agree? I mean, the idea Mill has is something like the harm principle. I'm only justified in restraining someone if they're going to hurt someone else. And yet here we have Acton talking about duties and conscience as the preconditions to liberty. That seems striking to me. What do you think?
Well, Acton did not like Mill, and he wrote an essay about it. He criticized his notion of freedom. He had a completely different notion of freedom. Freedom. This is not a liberty of doing of what one wants, even if, as Mill says, limited by freedom of others, but duty to do what one ought to. In case of Acton, liberty is very close to morality. And that is, I think that if I can change a little bit the tone of our discussion, is that for Acton, man or individual is not a solitary figure, individual who can dictate then or impose
his own terms.
His terms on the society. But he's a part of the community.
Okay.
This is, I think that this is the one of the most striking things in Acton, because he was a classical liberal, and at the same time claiming that individual is part of a community, not just a solitary figure. And as Aristotle stated, and in this sense he denied the basic premise of liberal thought. Liberal thought assumes that we are individual, and our freedom is the foundation of political society, that our rights are in a sense limitless, as long as they do not encroach on freedom of others. He disagreed with that very strongly. What is striking in Acton is that he saw that we are a social being, a political animal, as Aristotle would say. Therefore, what is most striking is his thesis is that he sees individual as a part of the community. Therefore, community has also its own rights. We cannot impose our own views on the community and force the community to accept it, because we are part of it. I guess it's an echo of Aristotle's statement that if you see an individual who is alone, he is either God or an animal. If you are a human being, then you are not alone. You are in the community. You are part of it, integral part of it. Therefore, your freedom is cannot be detached from freedom of others and freedom of the community as a whole. That's part of his seeing how political liberty can look like.
Interesting here to think about his accounts of liberty in different formative periods in Western civilization, I think, compared to, and I think maybe it's not so much a conventional historiography anymore. I mean, we have the idea of the Dark Ages, or the Middle Ages has a period of ignorance, barbarism, religion run amok, and then it's the Renaissance and the various enlightenments that bring us out of that, and we are always on the march. We're always in progress, forward-looking, and that seems to mean various things in Europe and in America. Lord Acton, though, really flips that, I think, particularly with his account of the Middle Ages and the growth of liberty in that period. And obviously religion, as we've been discussing, is a part of that, but he emphasizes something else about political institutions I wanted to get you to discuss, and that is one problem we have is feudalism, which he does not like, but yet we also have decentralized political structures, which he emphasizes, and then he turns around and he says, in the early modern period, we lose that, and we lose that to absolutist monarchies, actually because of a belief in reasoned sovereignty. So talk about that, because I think that's crucial in his work.
Yes, it is. What is striking in his thought is that he saw in early modern Europe as something which reversed the development of liberty. He claims that liberty is a providential idea, supported by providence, by God, and liberty grew gradually since antiquity, and actually liberty especially liberty developed by Christianity, undermined ancient state, which he identifies as a dreadful tyranny. And then he says Middle Ages are a period in which this natural organic liberty develops. We tend to think that Middle Ages is the Dark Ages, and that there was no freedom there. And he claims that it's just otherwise. That the Middle Ages created a society, a state society, in which central power is limited. He, of course, as a student of Tocqueville and Burke, saw the main threat to liberty coming from the central government. So he stresses that the power of monarchy in liberty is limited, and the society has many rights. The notion of rights of Englishmen or rights of Frenchmen began in the Middle Ages. Actually, we forgot about it, or society of that time in early Middle Ages forgot about it. Excuse me, in the early modern Europe forgot about it, and then we came to 17th century when we were trying to open the door which already were opened in the Middle Ages, namely limited government, representative government, and the rights of the people. His notion of medieval society in which each estate had rights and duties, and and if central power broke it, then it was illegal power, and the society had the right to resist, even with armed resistance. That was the feature of medieval freedom. So, from his perspective, early modern time is a time of reverse, time of reduction of freedom, although it is also the time of more efficient government, intelligent government, as he called it, of Machiavellian kind, and he hates it, of course. He hates it.
Where does he see the contribution being played here? I mean, who are kind of the villains in Lord Acton's mind for this sort of restriction of liberty in the early modern period? You write about Machiavelli, Martin Luther, John Calvin, as people contributing to this, and then also, say, the Renaissance as well, and the political thought, the return to ancient thought, but also picking up, say, some of the elements of ancient thought that we had maybe moved beyond, and that is, say, the unity of religion and the state as one sword being held.
Well, he stresses that in antiquity, ancient state did not. When an ancient state expected loyalty from the citizen, regardless of sphere, whether religious or civil. If one is a loyal citizen, then one must fit to the community. One of the, we could say, though Acton that does not elaborate on that, why Socrates was condemned to death. He was condemned to death because he did not believe in cities' gods. That created a situation in which we did not have any room for freedom. The novelty brought by Christianity was that Christianity demanded autonomy in religious sphere. That was the first limitation of political power.
Yeah.
Political power has to be limited because we are autonomous in our religious beliefs. That is why he claimed that Christianity in antiquity and the Middle Ages played such important role in the development of liberty in Western civilization.
And then there's the switch, and then there's the joining with state power in the early modern period by the church.
Yes, and in the early modern period, the situation reversed because the church was subordinated, lost its autonomy, and then later on in the 17th and 18th century became a servant of the state. So that in a sense, that is the clue why Acton attacked the Catholic Church so much, and also Protestant Church during the early modern time. That the achievement of the Middle Ages was lost in the early modern Europe because the Church lost its autonomy and betrayed, in a sense, its mission. Its mission was to allow individual and his community to be free. So that is why the church betrayed its mission. But
is this a way to? Is this a way also to think about his opposition to the doctrine of papal infallibility announced in the First Vatican Council?
Yes.
Is this where he's coming from?
Exactly.
Okay.
He saw the notion of papal infallibility as the acceptance by the Church of political criteria, that namely the Pope became one more leader of absolute power in Europe. That is why he hated it so much. The Church was supposed to limit political power, and by claiming infallibility, and he predicted really dire consequences of that, he resisted it as much as he could. But if I can redirect a little bit our discussion and go to if I can, to his notion of freedom, I think that
okay.
this is something we should discuss. Is that Acton stressed that citizenship or liberty starts from the bottom. I mean, we are free or not free on individual level, on the level of our community. We all live in some sort of community. We, as Aristotle said, are political animals. We have to be in some group, society, and this is how freedom starts. Now he says that the polity, in order to be free, has to have higher law, which is the only arbitrary element in his notion, in his concept of liberty. And then, other than that, he relies completely on local custom, local laws, local habits, and leaves complete freedom. Higher law is necessary because if we do not have this sort of a signposts telling us as human beings what is evil and what is good, then we can let us take America as an example. America was a polity which Acton clearly admired,
yes,
despite various criticisms, but considered to be one of the brightest and freest society in the world, and at the same time, this society, the freest community on earth, was able to tolerate for a long time slavery. So without higher law, we can make mistakes. We are not the source of good and evil. We have to depend on higher law. Higher law is the only arbitrary element in its thought.
What do you mean when you say arbitrary? What do you mean?
Well, arbitrary meaning that there is higher law which says us to what is good and bad.
Okay. Why are you saying that's arbitrary? I'm curious.
Well, he uses that term arbitrary. Okay. Arbitrary power, arbitrary element. Well, arbitrary element is that
it's out of our control. It doesn't come from us. Is that what you're?
It's something which comes from above or something outside of us, and it has a negative connotation in case of political power. But if we have an arbitrary, who are we to say that slavery is bad? I mean, societies. If we look at that ancient world, they believed that this is a normal state of things, and society cannot exist without slavery. So, arbitrary element means that we are told that this is wrong. We cannot do that. And he believed very strongly that we as human beings believe to have this sort of guidance. Otherwise, we can wander and then, in spite of his all sympathy towards the Confederation in the Civil War, he still condemned slavery. So that's something very important.
Okay, go ahead. No, go ahead. Complete your thought.
I think that I'm not sure if for a listener to our discussion, it is clear what Acton understood by liberty or by freedom. I think that we should explain that.
Share with us, please.
Yes, if I can. Acton states that liberty starts from the bottom. That is why he loved so much American Republic or American, even in the colonial times. We organize our life. We decide about basic things, and America is the best example. Although England was also a good example, though more complicated. But America is a clear example. The colonists coming from Europe to a virgin world, and they have to organize their world. They first they have to survive. There is no assistance coming from London, from England, and they have to. And then also they came with a clear vision that they have to be free in terms of religion, and that's how freedom starts at the beginning on the local level, in town and county, when the people build their church, start their community, and then develop a further layer of political organization on the colonial level. They have colonial assembly which represents them, so that's how representative government starts. At the same time, they need to have higher law which guides them, what is wrong and what is good, in this way, American government began in the colonial time, and then it grew step by step, organically, to the War of Independence and the American Revolution. That's how freedom starts. You cannot be citizen, you cannot be free if you live in a society in which you are endowed with various freedoms by a central government which is omnipotent at the same time. And I think if I can switch a little bit, our discussion is his notion of of liberalism. Acton was a quintessential liberal. No one questioned him as a liberal in the 19th century, and he claimed. I mean, this was the guy who hated something which right now is considered to be liberalism. He said liberalism is something different. Liberalism, it is an idea which serves liberty, not equality, not justice, not anything else, but liberty. He said the end of government is liberty. Of course, that can be tempered by other reasons like justice and equality. You cannot have, of course, freedom in society which denies liberty, but denies equality. But at the same time, he stressed that liberty is the most important thing. Now, he also claims that liberty is the providential idea. It is something which, unlike Tocqueville, who claimed that equality is the most important idea, liberty for Acton is the most important idea. And liberty as a providential idea cannot be destroyed by anything because it is supported by divine providence. So even if
why does he believe it's supported by divine providence?
Well, he claims that liberty, even in the most unfriendly conditions, persevere.
Okay.
Persevere. So he says striking things like that's the beginning of his essay on liberty in antiquity, when he says that when we have a government which is arbitrary, which does not tolerate freedom, as an example, he uses absolute monarchy in France and then also Russian autocracy, and he says then liberty is protected by institutions which normally do not serve freedom, like venality of offices. That was the custom of the French monarchy, or corruption in Russian autocracy. When you cannot achieve what life requires in a sense, you then bribe someone to get things done. So he says liberty cannot be destroyed. This is the basis of his claim that liberty is a providential idea and never can be destroyed.
So this is interesting because, and maybe we can end with this question, because I think it's something that's been on my mind, and I think maybe you've answered it. Liberty would not just be a Western thing, as far as Lord Acton is concerned.
Well, that must be true if we are Actonian in our thought, although he researched only Western society. And that is why at the end of my book I appealed to researchers to check it, whether his principles can work in other societies, whether it is really true that freedom starts at the bottom level on the local community, and whether cannot be destroyed. That this is something, that this is a basic idea of any human being and the community in which that individual lives, Therefore, it is interesting. I have no idea. I haven't researched it. I know too little about non-Western societies to say whether Acton was right or no, or not right. But nevertheless, he said that this is universal.
Maybe I lied, Christopher. Just another question that I wanted to ask you for this. What did Lord Acton conceive of regarding his discipline, that of being a historian? What did he think the role of a historian was?
Well, he elevated the historian's job to the highest level possible. He claimed that historian, he used that term, a hanging judge. Historian's duty is to judge whether the past crime, which were not punished in temporal world, is evaluated at least and judged. So historian's duty is not, this is something which no contemporary meaning now, current historian would agree. We now claim that history should not use value judgment, but Acton claimed that this is historian's main job, to evaluate the deeds, the conduct of various figures in the past. That's historian's duty.
Christopher, I wanted to thank you so much for being here today. The book is Power Tends to Corrupt, Lord Acton's Study of Liberty. We've been talking about it with the author, Christopher Lazarski. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
This is your host, Richard Reinsch, and you have been listening to a podcast that can be found at libertylawtalk.org, where you can subscribe, comment, find other episodes, and links relevant to today's conversation. Our email address is mail@libertylawtalk.org.